All right, let's get right into it. When you think about the United States, you're really thinking about a country that's built on one specific set of rules. And that rule book, the supreme law of the land, is the U.S. Constitution. But here's the thing. It's not some dusty old document locked away in a museum. It's the active, living blueprint for American government and life.
But here's a little secret. Before they got this blueprint right, there was let's call it a rough draft. And to put it mildly, it was a disaster. So what happens when a brand new nation's very first attempt at a government starts to completely fall apart? Well, that crisis is exactly where the story of the Constitution begins.
So, meet the Articles of Confederation. This was America's first shot at a constitution, adopted back in 1781. It created what they called a League of Friendship between the states. The problem? The central government it created was incredibly weak, and honestly, that was on purpose. I mean, they just fought a war against a powerful king, so they were terrified of creating another strong central ruler. But that fear, that weakness, nearly caused the entire American experiment to crash and burn.
And under the Articles, the country was just in total chaos. George Washington himself said the biggest problem was simple: no money. You see, Congress could print money, but it was practically worthless because they had no power to collect taxes. And with no money, you get no army, which left the new nation completely vulnerable. Meanwhile, the states were acting like their own little independent countries, ignoring Congress, making their own rules. And then things boiled over. Events like Shays' Rebellion, where angry farmers rose up in Massachusetts, proved that the national government was totally powerless to keep order. The whole system was just broken.
By 1787, it was painfully obvious that a simple patch job wasn't going to cut it. So a convention was called in Philadelphia for the, quote, sole and express purpose of revising the Articles. But the delegates who showed up, they saw the crisis firsthand, and they quickly realized they needed to throw the whole thing out and start fresh. They needed a total rewrite, a whole new blueprint.
And that brings us to the Constitutional Convention of 1787. Just imagine this. For 4 straight months, through a hot summer, delegates from 12 states met in intense, secret, closed-door sessions. They argued, they debated, and ultimately, they forged a brand new framework for the nation. I mean, the future of the entire republic was being hammered out in that one room. And this slide really shows you just how huge of a change this was. On one side, you have the Articles, a weak league of friendship where the states had all the power. On the other side, you have the Constitution, which created a unified nation under the idea of we the people. It swapped out a powerless central government for a much stronger federal system. And where the Articles had basically no executive or judicial power, the Constitution created 3 co-equal branches. This wasn't just a small edit. It was a revolution in how to structure a government. But, getting there was not easy. The final document was really a masterpiece of compromise. On huge issues like slavery and how states should be represented, the nation was deeply, deeply divided. And this quote from an aging Benjamin Franklin really sums it up. Nobody in that room thought it was perfect, but they believed it was the absolute best they could achieve together, a practical, workable plan to save the nation. Now, the absolute core genius of this new plan was the separation of powers. The framers, who were big fans of Enlightenment thinkers like Montesquieu, designed a government with 3 distinct branches. Why? Well, the goal was simple: to prevent any one person or any single group from getting too powerful. They built a system of what we now call checks and balances. And the design is actually pretty elegant when you break it down. Think of it like this. Step 1, you've got the legislative branch, which is Congress. Their job? To make the laws. Step 2, you have the executive branch, led by the president. Their job? To enforce those laws. And finally, step 3, you have the judicial branch, headed by the Supreme Court. Their job? To interpret the laws. It's a logical flow. Make, enforce, interpret. And this whole structure is laid out clear as day right at the beginning of the Constitution itself. Article 1 creates Congress, the legislative branch. Article 2 sets up the president, the executive branch. And Article 3 establishes the Supreme Court, the judicial branch. It's all right there. It's the blueprint, written down in black and white. So the document gets signed, and it's sent out to the states to be approved. But almost immediately, there's a huge outcry. People looked at this new, powerful federal government, and they said, wait a minute, this is all well and good, but what about us? What about the people? What's stopping this new government from stomping all over our individual rights? And that was the main argument of the folks who opposed the Constitution, the anti-federalists. In fact, several really important states, like Virginia and Massachusetts, basically said, we will only agree to this new government on one condition. You have to promise to add a list of protected rights immediately. And that promise is what led directly to the creation of the Bill of Rights. And so, in 1791, they made good on that promise.
The first 10 amendments to the Constitution were officially ratified. This collection of rights, specifically designed to put limits on what the government can do, became known around the world as the Bill of Rights. And in a lot of ways, this is what completed the original project.
And look, these aren't just some historical ideas. These are the freedoms that shape your life today. They guarantee fundamental things like freedom of speech and religion, the right to bear arms, protection from unreasonable searches by the police, and the right to a fair trial if you're ever accused of a crime. Think of them as the government's do-not-cross lines when it comes to your personal liberty.
But the framers were smart. They knew they couldn't possibly predict what the world would look like hundreds of years later, so they built a really crucial feature right into their design: the ability to change. The Constitution was never meant to be frozen in time. It was created to be a living document, something that could adapt to the needs of every new generation.
And boy, has it evolved. Through the amendment process they laid out in Article 5, the Constitution has been changed 27 times. And this process has allowed America to correct some of its deepest flaws and expand the promise of liberty. From the 13th Amendment finally abolishing slavery, to the 19th Amendment giving women the right to vote, and all the way to the 26th, which lowered the voting age to 18.
But the Constitution also evolves in another way, through interpretation. A really key idea here is called judicial review, which was established way back in an 1803 court case called Marbury v. Madison. This gives the courts the power to look at a law from Congress or an action by the president and decide if it's unconstitutional. It's like the referee saying, nope, that move violates the rulebook. It's another way we make sure that as times change, our laws stay true to the Constitution's core ideas.
So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that the Constitution isn't a final answer. It's a framework. It's the starting point for a continuous, often loud and messy, but absolutely vital conversation about power, about rights, and about what it even means to be a nation. And the best part is, it's a conversation that every single generation of Americans gets to join.
And that ongoing conversation leads us to one last big question. This American blueprint has been changed 27 times to meet the demands of an ever-changing world. So the question for us and for the future is a simple one. What will be the 28th?